Welcome to our 2021 DIA one-on-one video series. I'm with John Reites, CEO of Thread Research. Hi, John. Great to see you today.
Hey, Taryn. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. I understand we're going to talk a little bit about DCTs today. We can't have a conversation in clinical research right now without touching on the subject. So talk to me about how you see DCTs or evolving next to continue making clinical research more inclusive and accessible.
Sure. So when you think about decentralized studies and we think about what they inherently do, there's sort of two things that they can do to make studies more accessible and overall more inclusive. So one is when you're recruiting or having patients or people recruit in a clinical study that is more convenient to lifestyle, meaning it can be done in a mix of ways, right? Meaning some visits in the home, some visits via mobile apps, some visits in the clinic. That convenience makes it easier to participate, which opens up the types of individuals who can enroll in clinical trials because it's more conducive to their lifestyle. But second, and I think most importantly, decentralized studies offer us this ability to open up the geographic footprint in which we recruit from. So in other words, where we've typically been restricted to recruit from a geographic footprint around a clinical site, we can now expand that geography to hundreds of miles around because the amount of times that need to be traveled to a clinic is much less. And by doing that, what we're doing is we're getting into rural areas and areas that traditionally haven't really been advertised to participate in research. And so those two factors alone are just one of many that actually can lead to studies being more inclusive and fundamentally more diverse in the types of people they can recruit.
That's excellent. And so how do you see the technology evolving to meet those needs, especially for going out into more rural or underserved populations?
Sure. Well, what that really means, and at Thread, what's important to us is bringing technology to people. So we built it with people, participants in mind, but also with sites in mind, but also home health nurses and call centers and other stakeholders that are now involved in research that traditionally had different roles in the past. They now have front sort of leading roles in decentralized studies. And so when you think about using tech, it's about having one place for the sites or home health nurses to go. It's also about having one place for the patients to go to. And so when you kind of have that technology and then you can enable them to do their data collection, their consenting, their medical device work, their telehealth virtual visits in one place, you make it really simple. So when you go out into a rural area, you have devices that can be done on Wi-Fi and LTE without service. So you're kind of thinking about how do you adapt and use technology in rural areas. And frankly, the industry's really moved really far in that direction now, especially with telecom and data connectivity around the globe. And so, when you look at doing this type of work globally and moving into rural areas, actually even the US, which is where we think about, is actually really behind in data connectivity. Frankly, Asia Pac and in some places in Europe and Latin America are much higher than us. And so what that really means is the digital enablement or ability for us to do studies in more rural areas is really there with a couple backups and nuances that you account for. But again, having one experience, one technology that can be flexible and take on all that work in one place is the thing that we found to be the real key to maximizing a participant's retention and engagement in a study, but also helping the site and the home health nurses to be a part of that and reduce their burden in a study.
John, that's excellent. Thank you. And since technology is just one piece of it, though, what else is required for organizations to make that successful transition to a hybrid or a DCT study?
Sure. Well, we talk a lot about, and we have entire groups that do design consulting, and we try to help customers, help sponsors think about not just how to do a hybrid or fully decentralized trial, but how to crawl, walk, and run into it. And what I mean by that is that some organizations we've worked with have done 30 of these, and others are just doing their first. And you don't have to do everything on day one. It's better to start and foundationally do what's best for the populations and the therapeutic areas that you're serving. And so what we do is we really want our customers to think about just starting and having a framework and building from there. And that's really what we think about as an adoption and scale model. And so you think about how do you do your first study, then how do you do studies 2 through 5, then how do you do beyond 5? And so that approach, again, looks different for every person and every organization, but that mentality to take measured steps, to take steps that you balance, steps that you analyze, and that you put performance metrics around is really an important way to do it. And so what I would say is, you're right, it's a change management exercise. And I know that's kind of the new buzzword in our industry, but it's true, right? It's about educating and about taking measured steps in the direction to not just do decentralized studies, but to do decentralized studies well that you can scale globally.
Excellent. You talked about the crawl, walk, run approach to this. What are some of the things that sponsors and CROs should look at as they evaluate DCTs for some of their upcoming projects? What are those data or metric points that you would recommend?
Yes, there's a lot of them, Tara. I mean, there really are. Our first analytics suite that came out, I think we had 54 KPIs, and a lot of them specific to decentralized studies, because DCTs kind of have some unique nuances in them when you think about visits that are in the home, on the go, not just in the clinic. So, but a couple I'd recommend is, when you're looking at the performance indicators, we're looking at, first off, performance indicators around retention and compliance and persistence, because you're engaging people more often in a DCT. And so being able to track those and determine when a particular participant is losing or falling out of compliance, you can escalate digitally and have a site intervene, because there's a lot more activity happening in between the clinic visits. But I would say the second thing is really interesting. We published quite a bit of work on benchmarking the data. So we've actually provided the early remnants of a benchmarking tool that actually shows how your DCT is performing against traditionally designed studies. So that, you know, a lot of times when you need to compare how your DCT is going, you can compare it to other DCTs, but this is all new in the last 5 years. So there's not this baseline to choose from. So when you compare it to our DCTs plus a baseline of 1,400 other traditionally designed studies, you start to get a really good flavor and a solid, really a solid backing for how well am I performing in a particular area compared to what we've been doing, you know, for the last many years in research.
You know, DCTs has really exploded in the last 400 days since the pandemic hit. Where do you see this going? Is this going to be scalable and sustainable for the future?
Sure. Well, you know, you have to take a grain of salt. I built and operate a company focused on helping people do decentralized studies. I don't just drink the Kool-Aid, I sell the Kool-Aid. And so keep in mind too that we're a believer in this. But what I would say is, we're a believer in a measured, adopted change management approach to get there. Meaning that we, you know, our team, my company globally, has all been a part of pharma and CROs and e-clinical companies, and we believe in maturing and modernizing clinical research. But we know that our sort of industry is better at taking evolutionary steps as opposed to revolutionary steps, and so we have to really walk into that. But the thing that's really important about this whole premise here is when you think about this decentralized trial model, the pandemic taught us that we all had to buy better equipment and live our lives in a more of a hybrid world. So everything everybody's doing, and not just in the US, globally, is adapted in a year and a half to a hybrid world. We feel like even when you see some retraction after the pandemic, and people, which I'm excited to say, go back to stores and go to theme parks and do all that fun stuff, what's going to happen is people aren't also not just going to say, well, I don't ever want to do anything digital again. The benefits of this omni-channel experience in life is something that we're supporting in clinical trials. And so, yes, we continue to see growth, not just because we say it, but also we see it from our sponsors and customers and where they're going at enterprise levels. And I think that gives us hope that if we continue to lean in, we'll actually make a better clinical trial experience for everybody involved. And, you know, ultimately, Taryn, like, the piece for me is that decentralized studies, I really would, in the next few years, would like to see the word decentralized crossed out. And it's just how we do studies. That's what patients and sites and other people are starting to say, and we believe that.
It's exciting. It's fun to be part of the revolution of the evolution, isn't it? So
it is. It's hard work, and anybody who says, oh, it's easy and you just do this and you just do that, has not done enough of them. Our team has got battle scars and gray hairs and all those terms from doing the work. But I got to tell you, I love seeing our sponsors, our customers who are digging in with us, who want to learn and optimize and make it better. Why? Because we're all on a mission to make studies more efficient, more inclusive, but change and modernize how these studies are done, because it's all what we care about. It's all why we're in this business, to bring these products to market faster and for patients. And so I really feel like this leaning in that we've seen in our industry with DCT is it's a welcome change, because it's really pushed us forward and cut a few years off of a path that we were already on. But the reality is we have to take advantage of it as industry, and we have to move from talk and get to do and continue to lean in and make this work out the best for our industry.
Excellent, John. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your thoughts in DCT. And I'm leaning in with you. So thanks for being with us.
Karen, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, everybody. Appreciate it.